As a lifelong football fan, it's always an honor to be able to catch up to current and former NFL players. And this episode is no different. But what's even better than that is when there's so much more depth to the person than just their career. In this episode, we sit down with John Welbourn and discuss everything from his playing career to how it took years after his retirement to be able to even watch an NFL game, and then dive into the current state of affairs that we are in today. Everything from how fear has taken hold to the Second Amendment to personal responsibility and how important that is to us. This is the No Excuse to Miss podcast. Welcome back to the No Excuse to Miss podcast. I am your host, Scott Valkortson. This week's guest is one that I've been looking forward to as a lifelong football fan and for many other reasons. He spent a decade playing in the NFL. He is the founder and CEO of Power Athlete, giving talks all over the world. He's also the host of Power Athlete Radio. I was fortunate enough to meet him at Winter Strong a couple years back and enjoy his take and insight on so many different topics. I'd like to welcome to the show John Welbourn. How's it going, John?
I'm good, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. I know you're a busy man, so I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. No problem. Thank you.
So let's kind of jump right into it. For those that don't know, can you give us a little bit of background? I know you were born in California, I believe.
Yeah. No, I grew up in Southern California, youngest of three boys, played sports growing up, got into, martial arts and fighting pretty early on. And I think had some visions of me being like a professional boxer at one point. And then I remember I was like probably about 14 years old. And I got in the ring with a kid I was 6 foot, about 163, got in the ring with a kid who was about 6 foot, 165, who was about 4 years older than me. And I remember he hit me pretty good with a nice straight left and split my eye open. And I remember thinking like, I'm going to go play football. And I ended up going out and playing football and doing pretty well and got something like 100 scholarship offers by the time I was a junior in high school, and ended up going to UC Berkeley, playing football there, graduated in 4 years with a degree in rhetoric, and then did my master's work in education my fifth year, and then got drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles in 99 and went and played in Philly, came in, started as a rookie, started for the next 5 years, and went to the Kansas City Chiefs, played there for 4. And then in my 10th year, went to New England Patriots and ended up getting hurt in the last preseason game. Came home and had surgery. And as I was rehabbing on the couch, I got a phone call from the CEO of this little fitness company asking if I would be interested in coming and helping them develop their tech on how to train athletes. And that little company was called CrossFit. So I thought it might be something, it seemed like a pretty good idea at the time. I felt that they had some pretty good legs and might do something pretty amazing. So I worked with CrossFit for a number of years. 2012, we started Power Athlete, and Power Athlete just started really as just an information resource for athletes. I had a blog and a lot of information, and then over the years, it's really just grown into like helping people develop fitness technologies, training systems. So we have a ton of training programs. We write programming for about 5,000 people around the world a day, and we certify coaches. Like you said, did a podcast, ton of information, put out merch, and just really just try to have a beacon of light in terms of like the insanity and really just the bullshit of training and really just performance training. So just trying to bring a little bit of what I know about about professional athlete and training and getting people ready. And it's been really interesting the last couple of years. I mean, I've been doing this almost as long as I've been played in the NFL, so it's been exciting.
Well, and it seems like from when I've heard you speak or talk on different podcasts that you were like a little bit, would you say you were somewhat ahead of your time when it came to training and nutrition for the way the NFL was at the time?
Yeah. I mean, so I was super fortunate in that I've had really good mentors my entire life. And when I was 14 years old, and I'll take it back about a year or two before that, I remember telling my dad I wanted to lift weights. And my dad didn't lift weights and didn't really train. And he just kind of looked at me and said, "Why do you want to do that? It's just counting to 10 over and over again. Stupid people do that stuff." So my dad was real smart, graduated high school at like 16, graduated college at 20, graduated law school at 22. And he was a trial, criminal defense attorney for 55 years. And just real sharp dude. Like photographic memory. Just very intelligent, very condescending father, which I think is always funny whenever people ask me, like, "Oh, you're pretty sharp." I'm like, "Well, you didn't grow up with a real smart, condescending father like I did." But I always wanted to lift weights, and as I've had. It's interesting. Like, it's not until I think you have your own kids, or maybe you go a little, step away from, the bubble of professional sports for a while, that it gives you an opportunity to really look back and reflect on a lot of this journey, I guess you could say. And I recounted the story recently to Tex, or one of the guys on the podcast. I remember I was like maybe 11 or 12 years old, and there's a thing in California called junior lifeguards, and you start when you're like 9 or 10 years old, and it's basically like a lifeguard training program. It takes like 6 years. You start when you're 10, and by the time you're 16, you take the test and you become a lifeguard. And it's called junior lifeguards. And like, we went to the beach every day. Everybody, like my brothers were in it. Everybody does junior lifeguards. And I remember I was probably 12 years old, and we were at the beach, and we were doing like CPR on like a CPR dummy, and it was at one of the aid stations. And like, we saw this like crowd of people, and we heard all this noise, and we looked over, and there was like, it just like, we couldn't tell what it was. It was just like a mass of humanity, like people yelling and like moving. And it was just this insane deal, like on the boardwalk, which is like, we call the Strand, which is like the cement place where people ride their bikes at the beach. And we went over to take a look, like not sure what it was. And we saw this dude strolling in just like a pair of like kind of like dolphin nylon shorts and like a string tank top. And the dude looked like a superhero. He looked like just like his chest was so big, it looked like a shelf, like he could sit a drink on the top of his chest. And the dude was just like strolling, and we were like kind of like saw him. We were like, holy shit! Like, people were like making noise, like it was like a Captain America or a superhero, like in downtown New York kind of a deal. And he walked over, and we kind of followed him. We're watching, and he proceeded to like, there's like a big ramp up to where the parking lot is. It's probably 100 yards. We watched him sprint up and walk down a bunch of times, and then the guy walked away, and it turned out it was Lyle Alzado in his prime.
Oh wow!
He was like probably 6'2", 6'3", 300 pounds, just like looked like a pro bodybuilder, ran well, moved well, was just an absolute beast. And I remember seeing him and being like, I want to lift weights. And so I remember I told my dad I wanted to lift weights. He scoffed at it. And then it wasn't until I got to high school that I got to actually go lift weights and train in football, and was really excited to go to the weight room. And, we didn't really have any coaching. It was pretty crappy. Like, we were trying to like learn how to lift weights from older guys that didn't know how to lift weights. And it wasn't until there was an old power lifter who trained in our neighborhood, who was, owned a nutrition shop. He invited me to come over and lift weights at his gym, which was in his garage. A guy named George Zangus, and George owned a company called Marathon Nutrition. He invented the super suits and the wraps. So he was real early into the powerlifting game, and was a longtime power lifter, and, sponsored, Bill Kazmaier and, Fred Hatfield when he did his world record squat. Pretty famous dude in that respect. And he would just, he banged weights every day in his garage, and he would invite, boys, young guys from the high school who were pretty strong football players to come in and be his training partners, which is kind of cool, mentorship. So I went over to George's, and that's where I learned to lift weights. And I remember the first day I showed up, I didn't get to lift weights. I just had to rack weights. And I remember I was there a couple hours, and my dad pulls up and he's like, "You ready?" And I'm like, "No, we're still here. I haven't lifted yet." He's like, "All right." He just drove away, which I always think it's funny that my dad just dropped me off at some random old dude's house to go lift weights, and then left for like a bunch of hours. And then when I still hadn't done it, just like waved and drove away, Now today it's like helicopter parenting wouldn't exist. But so we started lifting weights at George's, and he really educated us on the strength game. And he talked a lot about his good friend, Fred Hatfield. And he talked about this thing called compensatory acceleration, which is the deal as mechanical advantage increases, so does speed. And I remember George, when I was young, said, don't lift weights like old people have sex, slow and careful. I want you to be violent with the weights. I want you to try to break the weights. I want you to attack these things to where when people watch you lift weights, they're nervous for the weights, or they're nervous that somebody's going to get hurt. And that was really impactful for me, because when I went out to go play football, I seemed to be able to punch harder and hit harder because, within the training paradigm of as mechanical advantage increases, so does speed. So I was always working on increasing the speed as, like you bring the bar down and as it's coming up, let's say in a bench press, as you're getting towards lockout, most people kind of slow down and they gently come to a lockout. I was literally trying to speed up the bar and fucking break it in half. And I did it when I squatted, I do it when I deadlift, and I trained my entire life that way.
Did you meet a lot of resistance from like your college and pro trainers?
You know what? I remember I was in college. People were like, dude, you're going to hurt yourself. And I was like, well, I mean, I'm not here to join the, Vienna Boys Choir. I'm not looking to make friends with these weights. I'm trying to hurt these things. And I think when people saw me play and they saw the violence and how I attacked the game, I don't think anybody ever talked to me about lifting weights ever again. I've never had anybody come over and be like, hey, maybe you shouldn't be so violent with the weights. And I was like, you know what? These things have no memory, and I'm trying to hurt them, and I'm trying to put my stamp on them. And I think that approach and the way that we approached football, and we talked about, there was a whole, George talked to us a lot about conditioning and what the Russians did and GPP and, we Russian squat programs. And there was a lot of information that he presented to us pretty early on that, was really the foundation of that training. That it's funny that, here we are, 30 years later, and people are seeming like, oh, like I'll hear people regurgitate this stuff, and I'm like, dude, we were doing that stuff in the in the 90s. So I think I was very fortunate to be put in a great situation within training, and it resulted in me getting to go playing the NFL for 10 years. I mean, I think I squatted 610 when I was 19. I benched 500 when I was 22. When I was 23 or 24, I benched 535 for a triple. I mean, I had 10 dead hang pull-ups at 90 pounds between my waist, RDL 600 for eights. So, I ran 4 9s, at over 300 pounds, had a 32-inch vertical. And
I think I've heard you say that you also at one point were under 10% body fat at over 300 pounds.
Yeah, I was the only guy at the time they'd ever tested in the bod pod that was over 300, that was sub 10%. I was about 8% body fat at the time. So I was 282 pounds of lean muscle. So I could walk pretty comfortably and play sub 10% body fat at over 300, which at the time, I'm sure it's been demolished since then. But, for the bod pod, when they brought it in, the guy was like, we've never had anybody over 300 sub 10. And I was like, okay.
And that had to almost be somewhat innovative, because back then, at least from what I remember, it seems like offensive linemen were, obviously they had gone way over 300 pounds on average before that, but with a completely different build from what I remember.
Yeah, there was an idea that somehow performance was equal to what you weighed on the scale. And I was pretty fortunate too. Like I said, I've had some really, really amazing mentors pretty early on. But my rookie year in the NFL, my agent hooked me up with a guy named Mauro De Pasquale. And Mauro hooked me up with my first supplement deal, and his company sponsored me. And Mauro wrote a pretty amazing book called The Anabolic Diet. And it was really just Mauro's the father of carb cycling and kind of like cyclical ketogenic diets. And so I remember having a consult with Mauro, and Mauro's like a world-class power lifter, just had trained a ton of people, and was just kind of early on in like that point in like the 90s was pretty much like the just the pinnacle for that type of like that diet stuff, making big, strong individuals. So, I mean, there's this another fortuitous example. And so Mauro sits down, we go over my diet stuff, and he's like, here's what you got to do. We're going to try to get you as big as possible. And then we're going to do like a bodybuilder. I want you to get as big and strong as you can. We're going to force feed a ton of calories. I want you to train twice a day. This is how much I want you to sleep. This is what we're going to do. And I want you to try to get up to like 320, 325. And then when you hit that weight and you're at the peak, then we're going to cut you down. We need about eight to 9 weeks to cut. And so I spent the whole off season, got up to 326, benched at 535 for reps, hit some pretty amazing numbers, pulled like 700 for 10 on the trap bar deadlift. I mean, just was really, really strong. And, but I was too big. And I remember hitting Mauro up, and I'm like, I think I hit it. And we dieted down, and like, basically took off 20 pounds in about the next like 7-8 weeks. And, the way we cycled the diet, I didn't lose any muscle, and, showed up training camp at 306, 307 pounds. And that's where I played the rest of my NFL career, was somewhere between that 306, 308, 310 at the most. And, I mean, it was nice to have a full set of abs. And, the other thing that was nice was, a lot of times when you see a lot of offensive linemen, they gain a lot of weight in their waist. And unfortunately, they end up developing a lot of back problems from it, because I think that the lack of balance and just the, lack of attention to detail within the trunk just, compounds these issues. So I was real fortunate, never had any hip injuries, never had any back injuries, and everything within my trunk was always real strong.
That's awesome. Those are some incredible numbers too. So, and I don't want to talk about football the whole time, because I want to get your take on a couple other things.
Sure.
But I do want to know, I know that you played, you said you finished your career at the Patriots, so obviously you were around Bill Belichick, but you were around some great coaches.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I played for, I got drafted by Andy Reid. So I played for Andy for 5 years, and then I played for Dick Vermeil and Herm Edwards. And then I got to go play for Belichick. So I played for some good coaches.
So in your opinion, we always hear on the outsider as fans, that this coach is, the best or whatever have you. But like, what separates because obviously they're all good on the X's and O's and strategy and all that stuff. But in your opinion, from like a leadership standpoint, what separates the great coaches from like the average coaches?
I think obviously like the first piece is, as a coach, you have to inspire people. And, you can either do that through rah-rah speeches, you can do it through motivation, but realistically in the NFL, because everybody's getting paid and they're professionals, you would hope, winning and having the chance to play at the highest level and win games, potentially win a Super Bowl ring, is by far the greatest motivation. So I don't know if, and somebody, like these questions become more and more apparent. Like, does Bill Belichick have, his place on the altar of football folklore and history without a Tom Brady? And for a lot of times people are like, no, it's Belichick. Brady's just a byproduct. He was lucky to go there. Well, you see Brady go down to Tampa Bay and tear it up, and you realize, it's probably a good chance that Tom Brady made Bill Belichick who he is. They would just, they could plug any and all players into different positions here and, put a scheme together, and Brady would find a way to win. So I think it's becoming pretty apparent that I think Brady was the magic sauce to that whole deal. But you know what? I mean, I'm pretty interested to see where he just cut Cam Newton. He's bringing in that young guy to come in and play for him. I think the Patriots are going to be exciting, because this was really Bill Belichick's opportunity to prove, hey, you know what? It wasn't Brady, it's Bill. But what I really liked about playing for Belichick was just the level of professionalism. Like, he came into meetings, it was no bullshit. You guys are professionals, do your fucking job. If you don't do your job, you're not going to be here. And as a guy who was, obviously in his 10th year, played a lot of football, that's really nice to hear. I don't want to, I don't need rah-rah speeches. I don't need somebody to kiss my ass. I don't need somebody to scream and yell and belittle. I just need somebody who's going to put us in the best position, put a great game plan together, and allow us to go out and win games and give you a chance to win a Super Bowl. And that's why I went. Unfortunately, I ended up getting hurt in that last preseason game. I chipped off a piece of bone. I have an issue where the popliteus muscle, which is the muscle that runs in the back of the knee, somewhere along the line just got calcified. And it packs a little bit of, when a ligament tendon calcifies, it starts laying down shitty bone, scroted bone. And I have a bone spur on the back of my knee that ended up dislodging and getting stuck in the joint during the game.
Ow.
And so I came out, and like I couldn't unlock my knee, and then I would kind of like crank it real hard, and I could feel it pop out, and I thought, oh shit. And finished the rest of the game, didn't say anything, and then they ended up calling me about 2 minutes before the final cuts and say, hey, we got to cut you today, but we want you to hang out. We're going to re-sign you tomorrow. And so they cut me. I hung out, came back the next day to get re-signed. And they put me back through a physical. They found it. And the doctor's like, why didn't you tell us yesterday? And I'm like, well, because I've never been cut. And two, I've started every game. I mean, I've started my entire career. Like, I've never been like I never thought I was in a potential. I would have just like played through it till I couldn't play with it anymore. And at that point, they couldn't re-sign me. Sent me home. I had knee surgery, and that's when I was rehabbing, and CrossFit hit me up, and I decided to go do that. And as I was still rehabbing my knee, still rehabbing, it was about a full year later until I was ready to go. But at that time, I'd already been out of football for, almost 2 years, because I got hurt in the preseason. So I missed that whole year. And then it was almost like another 6-8 months before I was ready to go. So it was, I just kind of missed the window. And, we were teaching and doing a lot with CrossFit and had a full-fledged business. And so I decided instead of going back and giving it one more chance, I would just call it good and do what we're doing now.
Did you miss it at all? I know I hear a lot of, former pro athletes that.
It took me, it took me years to be able to watch the game. And to the point where I was, I was Tony Gonzalez's best man at his wedding, and he's still been one of my friends for years, but he would call me up, and when he went down to Atlanta, hey, come to this game, come to my last game. And I didn't go to any of that. I didn't go to I still haven't been back to a football stadium, but it was extremely difficult to watch for a lot of years because I didn't get to end it the way that I wanted. I feel like, I started 16 games in my 9th year. I get hurt in my 10th year, and it wasn't how I wanted my career to end. And the worst part about it is, and I still think even at 44 years old, I still watch, and I know I could still go out there and play. And I still train every day like somebody's going to call me, just because I figure that's how I've lived my whole life. So I'm going to stay in shape. Even when I went to Tony's Hall of Fame deal, I ran into Dick Vermeil and a bunch of people, and they were like, dude, you look like you could still play. And I'm like, because I still train every day. What do you think? I either shed down to 220 pounds or grow up to 420? I still get up, I run, I still lift weights, I still train. This is what we do. And, it's not going to change, but it was extremely difficult. And what's funny is my wife's a huge football fan, and she so now we watch football and we do a lot more. And she was like, man, I felt like you stole all those years of football from me. And I was like, I kind of did. Just because it was extremely hard to watch, not because I wasn't a fan of football, but because in my heart of hearts, I knew that I could continue doing the job, and I wasn't able to end it the way that I wanted.
Yeah, and that has to be tough, because I think that's, you always hear pro athletes talk that they want to end it on their terms.
Sure.
Which is why I think a lot of people keep thinking, well, if Brady wins, like he won last year, is he going to walk away? It would be on his terms. He won without Belichick. But I think, like you said, I think he thinks he can still go out there and perform and play, and he takes care of himself.
Yeah, he'll play. So Brady's different than a Peyton Manning. Peyton, comes back. I mean, Peyton had that hell of a neck injury. I mean, it's pretty interesting. I know. They worked some real next level voodoo to get Peyton back. There's a whole deal out of Germany called ACS, which is a deal where they spin down blood with these little kind of pearls, and it's the pearls block interleukin 1, which causes inflammation. I know Peyton went through a bunch of those rounds of injections and some really pretty next level stuff to try to heal his neck, and got the opportunity to come back and win a Super Bowl and right away, and where you going? I'm going to Disneyland, and I'm retiring, kind of a deal. So he got the opportunity. Tony got his opportunity to walk away the way that he wanted, to the point where I think he got offered a job on the sports desk, but it wasn't the job he wanted. So he went back and played one more year till he could get the job he wanted, which is amazing. So I think a lot of guys have the opportunity to end it the way that they want. I didn't. And I'll be pretty honest on that. It didn't end the way that I wanted. I think Tom Brady, they're going to have to carry him off the field. I think that as long as there's life in him, he's going to want to play the game to the point where, and I know this sounds awful and I wish this on nobody, but he's going to take a hit or something's going to happen, and they're going to have to cart him off, just because I think that dude has got so much game in him. He's got so much tenacity, just so much desire to win. And I think at this point, he doesn't, he knows he's the best to ever do the game, but I think he's at a point now where he wants to be the best to ever play pro sports. When they talk about Jordan, they talk about LeBron, that they talk about this. I mean, I think that he wants to have his name stamped on that I'm the best to ever do. The Natural is one of my favorite movies. Roy Hobbs, remember when he says, there goes the best that there ever was, Roy Hobbs.
Yeah.
I really think that that's Tom Brady. I mean, at this point, like, he's had 4 Hall of Fame careers. I mean, if you look at his career from 1 to 6, 6 to 9, 9 to 14, and then, the last 4, 6 or 7, I mean, he legitimately has a case for 4 Hall of Fame careers. And he doesn't look like he's slowing down. I mean, the guy played hurt, last year and still went out there and torched him. So I'm rooting for him, and I like Tom. I know him personally. When I knew him socially through Tony and hung out with him. I went to school with his sister at Cal. One of the guys that we work with at Power Dot, Eric Ladder, was good buddies with him. So, I mean, I've known Tom for a number of years, and I want to see him play for as long as he wants to play and be the best that he can. But I have a feeling either they're going to cart him away, or I think when he can't play at the level at which he wants to play, that's the point he'll walk away.
Yeah, it's just incredible to watch. And he's somebody a decade ago that I probably wasn't going to root for. But just now, as somebody in my mid-40s and watching what he's still doing as he approaches his mid-40s and the level of dedication and discipline and everything, you can have nothing but respect for when a guy carries himself like that.
Oh, yeah. And I'll tell you, yeah, I'm just kind of in awe of not only what he's accomplished, how well he's played, the level at which he's played, and the fact that, he's been able to do it. He did it for a long time with one team, and now he's gone down. And he has so much clout down there in Tampa that, and that coach is smart enough to be like, who do you want to play with, where Tom will reach out. And he's kind of the GM in a lot of ways. He's making personnel decisions. And what's amazing is the day he retires, he'll probably be a GM for a team. I mean, I would be, if I was the owner for a team and Tom Brady retires, I'm going to be there the next day being like, I want you to be GM of my team. I think he has that level of football knowledge and that clout that, guys are going to want to, come play with him because they want to win. You have guys that are, excellent players playing for the minimum just to play with Tom Brady because they want to win a Super Bowl. That's what happened at New England. And I think that's the greatest motivation when you have guys that can make more money somewhere else, but are willing to play for less because they want a chance to play with Tom and win a Super Bowl. That's when shit gets dangerous.
And there's just not that many people that come along in pro sports that have the ability to get people to do that.
No, not at all. And, people will be like, oh, LeBron. I'm not a LeBron James fan at all.
That makes 2 of us.
I'm just not a LeBron James fan. I mean, anybody that I think he's probably in the hierarchy, but it's below Jordan and it's below Larry Bird. It's below Shaq. It's below Kareem. It's below Magic Johnson. But people be like, oh, you're just saying it. I'm like, dude, you guys never go watch Larry Bird highlights. You want to watch a fucking player, one of the best ever played a game? That's, French Lick, Indiana, Larry Bird, So, but that's what I grew up watching when I was little, I mean, it was Magic versus Larry Bird and, Hakeem Olajuwon and, the Detroit Pistons and the Bad Boys. I mean, to me, that was better than this nonsense we're seeing today where people pull up and just shoot it from half court every time.
Yeah, I would completely agree. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and circle back around to something you said earlier, that you received a degree in rhetoric from Berkeley.
Yes.
So I assume that's why, one thing I always notice when I listen to you, whether you're talking about sports or, like you said earlier, the crazy world that we live in with all the different current events going on, is you have a way when you present your argument or your side of things that even if it's something like I maybe don't fully agree with or disagree with, you always present it in a way that it makes me stop and say, maybe I should look at it from that perspective. So a couple questions there is, and I think a part of that is, I know you are an avid reader and, you dive into history a lot and different things. So I'm sure you're very confident or very researched in your opinion and you just don't spout off the first thing that comes to your mind. But then the second part of that question is, how as a society have we gotten so far away from being able to have a conversation with people that disagree?
Man, so I actually had this conversation with my mom pretty recently, but she asked me, my nephew is, going to high school and, so I live here in Texas I did, obviously, like you said, I had a degree in rhetoric. And for a lot of people think like, what the hell is that? It was an argumentative, kind of slated, but really it was like an English philosophy degree with an argumentative approach. When I went on my recruiting trip to Cal Berkeley, I wanted to be an attorney. It's still what I had always planned to do. And so they ended up setting me up with this guy named Adrian Cragen, who was the dean of the law school, for a bunch of years at Bolt Hall. He'd since retired. He had been a tax attorney, had worked in Hollywood. And they, said, hey, we have a faculty advisor. We know you want to go to law school. We'd love for you to go meet with him. So I had the opportunity to go meet this really killer old dude named Adrian Cragen. And as I sat with him, he asked me, he said, why do you want to be an attorney? And I told him, I said, it's kind of our family business. My dad has been an attorney for years. And, my brother's in law school and my other brother went to law school, but he never practiced. And it's just kind of something that we've always been around. And so he asked me a little bit about my dad. It turns out that the old lawyer who apprenticed my dad when he was a young attorney, a guy named Kent Redwine and Adrian Cragen were actually good friends. So it was pretty, kind of a small world in that. And so I asked him, I was like, if I come here, any recommendations on what I should major in, classes I should take? And he sat and thought for a second. He goes, to be a really good attorney, you need to learn to read and write to the best of your ability. And here at Berkeley, we have a major called rhetoric that is perfectly designed if you want to be an attorney. It's you're going to read, you're going to write, you're going to argue, you're going to present. There's Socratic method. It's going to be excellent. And I think that's what you should do. So when I went to Berkeley, first year, I had the option of taking English. I asked if I could take rhetoric. They said, sure. So I took rhetoric 1A, 1B, loved it. And that was my major from then on. And what I really appreciated about the rhetoric major was the rhetorical approach for writing and analyzation. So when you read a book, we were constantly searching for what's the argument? What is the author trying to argue? What arguments can I extrapolate out of this piece? And more importantly, how can I structure them in such a way that I'm arguing something? And every paper was written down like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to argue. And this is the outcome I'm searching for. And then I would support it. And I think what it did is it taught me a certain way of approaching different topics. And as I was talking to my mom, because she asked me, she goes, do you remember anything from college? And I was like, I took astrophysics, interstellar dust, astro, I think it was Astro 10. I don't remember anything about astrophysics other than I did not want to be an astrophysicist. I took, a bunch of, we were kind of going through all the different classes, but what I really, and I don't remember the information in a lot of these classes, but I remember a lot of the books I've read. And and the thing that I learned within college was this rhetorical approach for analyzing problems. And so that was extremely valuable for me. And then when I graduated early, I graduated in 4 years. I had redshirted, so I had a fifth year. The only 1 year master's program they had was in education, so I applied. And then there was a scholarship for a 4-year letterman to go to Bolt Hall called the Adrian Cragen Scholarship that I investigated, and that's what I was kind of planning to do. Got drafted, and I figured I'd play football for a year or two. At the time, I was like, I don't know any white dudes that play in the NFL, and I don't know how long people play, so maybe I'll play a year or two, and I'll go to law school. And that turned into 10. So long story short, I'll work back on it. Whenever I'm confronted with anything, whether it be questions, thoughts, or really, what's happening within our present society, I really just approach it from that rhetorical standpoint. Like, what's the information? What's the argument they're trying to make? And can I decipher it? And then how do I feel about that? And can I combat that argument? So I feel like what's kind of hilarious to me, and I find a lot of irony every single day, which, people don't necessarily maybe share my point of view. But what's hilarious is if you go back and you look at Hollywood over the last 20, 30 years, the amount of dystopian movies that we've made, it's some of Hollywood's biggest hits. I mean, look at what was it? V for Vendetta, V for Vendetta with, all that is a classic dystopian movie. And it actually, the plot is what's happening today, worldwide virus, lockdowns, this idea of, seizing freedom for the people to protect them. I mean, it's hilarious. People love dystopian movies, but yet they refuse to believe that some of what's taking place in these dystopian movies is actually transpiring in real life. And so I wonder if it's Hollywood just desensitizing it to us, or maybe it's past people's intellectual capacity to really understand the magnitude of what's happening. So that's a really interesting thing. And the other big thing is, and I'll just give you a little anecdote. If you want to govern a lot of people or just a lot of things, benevolence will fail you. Kindness will fail you. Transparency will fail you. The only thing that will not fail you is fear. So, and I'll just give you an example. So my neighbor has a bunch of goats, right? So we live out here in the country in Texas. My neighbor's has a ton of goats. Those goats, they rotate them in pastures. They sit down, they eat grass, and all they do is eat all day. And if you would, like, he has 3 sheepdogs, and they're these big Anatolian shepherds, and they just kind of hang out and they watch the goats. When it's time to get the goats to move, the dogs stand up, start barking, and they run as fast as they can at the goats. When the goats hear the barking and they see the movement, they lift their heads, they get nervous, and then they run away from the direction of which the dogs are moving. And then the dogs push them into the next pasture or move them around. And then the minute that the dogs stop barking, they lay down and the goats go back to eating. That's a great analogy for what's happening within our society. Most people's heads are down, they're goats, they're just eating grass, not paying attention. And the only way they know how to move is when all of a sudden the big Anatolian shepherds, the media, whatever, social media, whatever you want to think, fear, whoever's in control, starts basically barking and running as fast as you can at those individuals. They get nervous and then they move. And I really think that that's a good analogy for what's happening within our society.
Oh, absolutely. The crazy part is it seems to, we're a year and a half into the craziest time in my life, probably. And people don't seem to have, I think some people maybe are starting to put 2 and 2 together, but it doesn't seem like a lot of people even to this day understand what's driving so much of this.
Well, think about this, right? If you were to take a frog and you were to throw it in boiling water, the frog would jump out of the water. But if you put the frog in cold water and it's in the water and you slowly turn the heat on and it gets slowly, the frog will sit in the water till it cooks itself. So I think what we're seeing is a lot of people not acting in their best interest because of the steady state that the heat's been generally turned up. And I think what happens is people become desensitized. And like I said, fear becomes like the minute you enter fear into the equation, most people will give away, they'll give away their rights. They'll abandon things. I mean, it's scary. Like, think about Ronald Reagan. The scariest words you'll ever hear are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." I mean, it's really become an interesting thing. And what we're seeing is that a lot of people, once fear takes them over, the fear of the unknown, the fear of this, that becomes like an emotional block where now all of a sudden the volume gets turned up to 10 and no longer will, intelligent, articulated, well-positioned information even enter the noise of that loud, that fear at 10. And it's kind of a scary deal. Like, like the fact that, you remember they said 2 weeks, hey, we're going to, shelter in place 2 weeks to flatten the curve. The one thing which is interesting is people don't ever give power back. Like I was laughing, I saw a meme the other day where, hey, we were out of Afghanistan. Does that mean the Patriot Act ends?
I saw that.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, once you give people that level of power, and I think our founding fathers, I was real lucky as a rhetoric major to be able to select classes. And one of the classes I took was like 18th century intellectual thinkers and politicians. And we really analyzed like John Locke and Thomas Jefferson and our founding fathers. And there were some things that they were really, really like hardline. These were, like solid things that they were going to fall on the sword on. One of them, which was no standing army. That's why the Second Amendment was put in place, was to protect the first. But realistically, we weren't allowed. We were not supposed to have a standing army in this country. And the idea that we were going to have a well-armed, well-positioned militia that could be called out in defense of, invaders, both foreign and domestic. So that idea of having a, well-supported, well-active, abled militia that could be called out instead of having a standing army, I think people forget that with the Second Amendment. And, and that's, I spoke recently at an event here in Austin, that was kind of a little bit of like, anti-mask, or not anti-mask, but really just like kind of pro-freedom. And, JP Spears, who's hilarious, he spoke.
Yeah.
This guy, Zuby, who's like a DJ music guy, who's got a pretty funny Twitter following, and Doc Parsley and a few other people. But the big thing I got up about was like personal responsibility. Everybody's waiting for everybody else to save them. And I'm a firm believer that, like, they've taught us for the years, they've conditioned us on airplanes, right? What do they say? If we get into turbulence and you see masks drop, put your mask on first before you help anybody else, right? The idea is that if oxygen is low, put your mask on so you can get oxygen, so you don't pass out trying to help other people. Does that make sense? So like we've been conditioned for years. And so what's pretty amazing, and my talk was really about like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? So you have the ability to life. You have the ability to live and die as you see fit. Liberty, your ability to breathe. Can I have liberty? Can I live a life that I'm proud of? Can I live a life that both is fulfilling and the way that I want it? On my deathbed, I can close my eyes and feel confident that I lived a life. And then happiness. Was I able to live a life that allowed, my children to grow, that, one that was happiness and unabated by, tyranny and fucking terribleness? And as I talked to these people, my thing was like, you are the master of your own destiny. Put your life mask on before you help anybody else. You guys are talking about red pilling people and trying to help and do this and this. Get your own house in order. Jordan Peterson said, how can you go out and govern the world if you can't keep your house in order? Wake up, make your bed, stand up straight. I mean, those 12 rules to live by from Jordan Peterson was so fucking timely and perfect, because everybody else is so concerned with what everybody else is doing. But at the end of the day, if everybody just took care of or started with themselves, and then once their house was dialed, then I can go out and help, I think we'd be a lot farther. And my comment to these people is, make sure you're healthy. Right. Everybody here, and I know Bocourse in Arms. I'm a huge fan of your rim fires. I shoot your rifle more often than I probably should. I told you, I told you I put a thermal on it, and I got a suppressor, and I have this bitch in tripod. And at night we sit out there, and like like varmints or any like raccoons or shit, we blast them. So. Super accurate, ton of fun to shoot. But like my advice to these people is, you guys, everybody's cheering about the Second Amendment, which is great. But at the end of the day, how many of you guys are proficient with your weapons? Do you guys just collect them like weirdos and put them in a safe? How many rounds do you shoot? Do you know how to clean your weapons? If something breaks, do you know how to fix it? Are you proficient that if somebody knocked on your door to call out the militia as our founding fathers intended, you are fit and able to go out and answer that call? And, I work as a contractor for the military, and we've done a ton of stuff with like 18th Airborne Corps, Texas National Guard, Naval Special Warfare. And I was sitting with some recruiters recently at an event that I spoke at, which was on national security in Pennsylvania. And one of the recruiters said that less than 25% of boys and girls 16 to 18 years old are able-bodied and healthy, no criminal records, but yet could pass the standards to join the U.S. military. And those are reduced standards. And then he asked me, he goes, how many adults over the age of 30 are fit enough to be called out in defense of tyranny like you're talking about? And I was like, I don't know. And he's like, probably less than 10%, more like 5 to 7. So we have a problem where our population is sick, unhealthy, not very fit. And, there's I forgot what the number is, but there's 330 million people in this country. There's something like 400 million guns. So that means that like most people own at least a few, which is smart. But how many of those individuals have gym membership? How many of them are focused? How many ever listen to this podcast and think I need to get my fat ass in shape? And you know what? If I'm going to go and I'm going to own these weapons, I have a responsibility to myself, to other Americans, and people around me to actually be proficient, whether that's hunting, whether it's actually actively shooting, training, doing everything. And those numbers just aren't there. So I think it's really this interesting piece of personal responsibility. Like if I'm going to carry a gun, I need to make sure that my weapon is dialed. I need to make sure that I'm extremely proficient, and that if I'm in a situation, I have the skill set to be able to not get my ass killed. And that was what I talked about at that talk, was the idea of personal responsibility. You have to be the one to make the decision. You have to be the one. Nobody's coming to save you. You have to basically, seize the day and be the individual that you imagine yourself to be, not just fucking sitting on your couch watching Netflix.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point. Yes, you have to be trained and proficient, but like you said, even from a health standpoint of how many people, and I think a lot of people are just confused on what to even put into their body, how to get started, how to do all that stuff, which is the one reason that I turn a lot of people onto your podcast, the Power Athlete Radio, is you guys really seem to break it down and keep it simple.
It's not that complicated. It's really not that complicated. And this is, so there was, have you ever heard of a guy named Dr. Michael Rose?
Yes.
So Dr. Michael Rose is an evolutionary biologist. He's probably one of the smartest dudes on the planet. I had the opportunity to hear him speak at the Ancestral Health Symposium a bunch of years ago. And when they break up evolutionary biology, they break it up into two time periods, like pre-Michael Rose and post-Michael Rose. So he gave a really interesting presentation on one of the project, or like one of the experiments, and something he had been real passionate about, which was fruit flies. So what they did is they went to like some orchard in like Massachusetts that had like apple trees there for like hundreds of years. And they basically collected a whole bunch of fruit flies and they brought them back to his lab in California. And they kept the fruit flies alive, basically feeding them like a diet of like, I think it was like applesauce, right? Like their ancestral diet. Then what they did is they bred, and they took, and a fruit fly lives about 7 days. So they could extrapolate and say, okay, this generation of fruit flies is 7 days. And they kind of like took generations out. Well, what they did is they kept like one group on the ancestral diet, took a generation, changed their diet from apples to bananas, then took another generation and they started changing their diet. And they realized, based upon these diets, that the fruit flies all lived a pretty good life till about 4 days. And then the fruit flies that were not eating their ancestral diet started to decline at a really massive rate. They weren't flying, they wouldn't breed. Literally it was like a tanking. And when they all of a sudden at day 4, like changed their diet back to applesauce, all of a sudden their health improved. And so I'm doing a really bastardized job of like his talk. You guys can find it on YouTube if you look up Michael Rose, AHS, fruit flies. But it really, and what he made a case for was, you get to a point where everybody's like, oh, I've been eating however I wanted my whole life and I've been fine. Then all of a sudden I hit the age of 40 and I stopped feeling healthy and I was gaining fat. And like I used to be able to eat what I want. Now I can't. Well, at a certain point around the age of 40, all of a sudden we have to return to our ancestral diet. And he was pretty clear. Kind of a paleo-esque, diet based around protein, carbs from, Paleolithic kind of, pre-industrial places, roots, tubers, bulbs, fats, diet, animal fats, both saturated and monounsaturated, like olive oil. Pretty basic, like Rob Wolf, Lauren Cordain, paleo diet kind of stuff. And as he's talking, I'm like listening to this guy talk, and he's been talking about, studies. And the one thing I'm struck by is how old is this dude? This guy looks great. I go up and look it up. He's in his 60s. I thought this guy was in his 40s.
Wow.
So his talk was amazing. Super sharp dude, like one of the sharpest guys on the planet. And I was just blown away by the fact that like he looked as good as he did physically. And he has a bunch of books on life extension and anti-aging. But it was really this idea that as you start to age, we have to return to our ancestral diet. And more importantly, we have to continue to train. That's why, hey, for my entire life, I've been trained to be big, fast, and strong and explosive. Why would I change it now? I'm not going to all of a sudden get into changing for marathon running. Like I still lift weights. We're still dynamic. I still jump. I still run. I still sprint. I still do all the things that I've always done. I don't do them with, twice a day, 6 days a week, but I still do these things. I've probably put more aerobic work in just because I know I need a bigger aerobic base to be able to do what I'm doing. But a big part of that training and that returning to that ancestral diet, a big thing I'm real hot on is always getting a ton of blood work. So I get my blood work done twice a year. making sure that, we're checking both, micronutrients and hormones and making sure that everything is, looking good, just because I don't want anything to sneak up on me.
Well, and that's something I started doing a couple years ago. After a little health scare, I started getting tested twice a year. And on the surface, people are like, well, that's too expensive. I can't do it. But then they'll go out and buy thousands of dollars worth of supplements and everything else, not counting the medical problems that could come if you don't catch it.
Well, what people forget is nobody, there's no such thing as the richest man in the cemetery. Like when Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos die, they're going to be the same amount of money in their pocket as Joe Blow down the street.
Exactly.
The ancient Egyptians built pyramids and had rooms full of gold and all this, that they were going to take it to the afterlife. And thousands of years when they undid it all that stuff was still there. So it's pretty fascinating when I run into people like, oh, that stuff's too expensive. I'm like, do you know what's expensive? A fucking health scare. Or finding that the age old an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I mean, what do you like? I've seen people get diagnosed with cancer, and for things that if they had just made some life changes earlier on, they could have avoided this stuff. So I mean, my thought is, I don't want to live forever. I do not want to live forever, but I would like to be able to live my best life and feel like 100 miles an hour, young and virile and strong and all this other stuff, right to the exact point where I don't get to live anymore. I want to live as close to that as I can, because for me, sickness, illness, being feeble and old and uncapable is not a life I want to lead. For example, I look at our president, and every time I see him up there, man, I'm outraged that the people around him would be promoting elderly abuse. I mean, it's a really sad deal that our president of the United States obviously has has advanced dementia and has, these neurological issues. I mean, it's like, all you got to do is Google Alzheimer's, dementia, and it's like 10 for 10. And it's elderly abuse that they're putting him up there, and they're giving him whatever they're giving him to get him up there. And like, every time I see it, my heart breaks that his wife and the handlers and the people around would put this old man in this situation and, put him up there when they know better. And that's a fucking awful thing. So, that breaks my heart every time I see him, because, I lost my father. And I think, even though that Joe Biden's got a piece of shit kid, he's still his father's son, and he should have the wherewithal to be like, this isn't how I want my father to be remembered. And he's up there making fucking horrible decisions that are resulting in a lot of bad stuff, man. And I just think, like, the fact that his wife and the people around him keep pushing that old man instead of being like, you know what, this was a bad idea, and this is destroying this individual's legacy.
And it's, I understand why some people, voted the way they did. I don't, people can vote however they want, but for people to now sit there and say there's, nothing wrong, he's, doesn't have any mental decline, or I don't understand how people can even do that.
I don't think that there's a single person on if somebody were to say to me, no, he seems fine and he doesn't have any mental decline, I would look for them to have mental decline, because you would have to be, but this is the idea too, man. Like we were talking about fear. The media did, and like, here's the thing. I'm not a Trumper by any means. I think Trump was a buffoon. I think he, a ridiculously dressed, weird hair, spray tan, just kind of a really interesting, kind of buffoonish character. But that dude was sharp as a tack. I mean, he seemed to literally thrive in that. And I think you need somebody that's high motor and high energy. The problem, though, is, the media did such a good job of making Trump this incredible villain. If they could have just taken Trump's social media, and they didn't have all the mean tweets to point to, does he really lose? So I don't know. The other thing I'm a little surprised by is that, for such a tech-enabled, for such a country that is in like the cusp of this like technological revolution, that we would keep selecting individuals to lead us that were like around the advent of cars. These guys in their 70s, these guys were born, in the 40s. It just seems so weird to me. these guys were old men when computers came into existence, and yet these are the individuals that we choose to lead us. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, that probably explains a lot of how we ended up where we're at right now.
Yeah, I think with as fast as technology is moving, I think you need a really, really just high speed individual that can understand what's happening. I mean, I'll tell you this. I sometimes think, I'm like, man, if I had access to that information, what could be possible? It's such an interesting thing. But I'll tell you, look at every single president, man. The only person who actually looked better at the end of his presidency was Trump. Obama aged in dog years. I mean, look at George Bush. I mean, Bill Clinton. Literally, those guys aged in dog years. For some reason, this level of drama made Trump look younger. I'm like, he looks better at the end of 4 years. He's the only person in history to Obama literally aged 20 decades. At the end of 8 years, I mean, full head of gray hair, just looked old. I mean, Trump, on the other hand, seemed to have found his youth pill, which was fucking controversy and battle. I mean, he had a fight every morning to wake up to. Can you imagine waking up every morning feeling like you have to fist fight every single person for the next 10 hours to even get back to bed? I mean, shit. I mean, some people get tired. I think that was Trump's fucking fountain of youth. Yeah,
and you look at it like the interrogation that he went through compared to what we do now, where the media is allowed one or two questions as long as it's on the script and he gets to choose who it is.
Yeah, what we're seeing is that it's not a level playing field. That the media and everything, believe me, it just goes to it's just another example of how disingenuous our media has become. I mean, I lived in the dorms with Bob Woodward, from Woodward and Bernstein, All the President's Men. His daughter was one of our suite mates, and I remember him speaking at Berkeley. And he talked about the media has to be the watchdog, it has to fight the corruption, that, it has to be unbiased and honest. And, and unfortunately we're in a situation where we've turned into this idea politics and this fucking opinions where people, turn on CNN and you get to hear, Don Lemon and, Chris Como and all these guys who aren't necessarily reporting on anything. They're just giving their fucking opinions, and they're getting paid a lot of money to give their opinions. But it's real easy when you have a political agenda and you have this whole news station that's not necessarily about giving news. It's about putting people up that give their opinions on current situations. Where's the Walter Cronkite? It's really, really, but it's been a slow shift. And they've taken, these news outlets and they basically have spun them into be these, political, fodder for these different canons. And it's disingenuous. But the problem is most people don't see it. They don't realize that these guys are just paid actors who are pushing a narrative that's helping to push somebody else's bigger narrative. And there's a whole bunch of chess pieces that we can't see that are underneath the table.
That is 100% what I think is going on. And unfortunately, I think we might be in this state for a little while, but hopefully there's an awakening sooner than later.
Man, I think if you're, and I don't mean this cold-heartedly or mean, but I think if people are waiting for people to wake up, they're going to be waiting a long time. I think I honestly wonder, at what point, what does somebody have to see to feel hey, we've been duped? This is something that I think about constantly. At which point do you feel like this thing's been rigged against me? Now I have to take action. I think if you've seen the present state of what's happening, shit, and this could go back 20 years. I mean, it's been pretty progressive. And I think the idea is that it's just kind of slowly, it's like the frog boy, turning a frog up, slowly bringing the heat up, shit, we got Bill Clinton going back, I've never had sexual relations with that woman, to producing the dress. And then all of a sudden, we find out the guy got a BJ in the Oval Office, which is hilarious because I've done the West Wing tour. I've been to the Oval Office and I don't know where, there's no fucking corner in the Oval Office. So I don't know where he got the BJ. But like that situation, or Oliver North with the Iran Contra scandal, and they're all of a sudden they're touting Oliver North as an American hero, and it's like Jesus, I mean, we were basically Venezuela oil and the CIA and defunding what we felt were the wrong regimes, and then the Iran Contra thing, funding arms to that. I mean, it's just like this stuff has just been perpetuating. And I mean, to the point where like the 9/11 thing was pretty interesting. I mean, the fact that they found the terrorist passports in that rubble was always kind of like, wait a minute, I'll believe a lot of stuff, but I don't know if I'm going to believe that one. So, and then all of a sudden, what do? We declare a war on terror, which is pretty interesting because I don't know where terror lives. I know terror is everywhere. So like, now we've just basically opened a checkbook to, basically bilk the American taxpayer because wars of occupation or transfers of wealth. And we bilked the American taxpayer over the last 20 years of $88 trillion. I mean, some astronomical, and I'm probably fucking that number up, but I remember seeing like, we pretty much could have paid off the mortgage of everybody and sent every kid to college and paid every individual in this country like $10,000 a year with the amount of money we spent in Afghanistan in the last 20 years. Like, where did all that money go? It went to contractors. Like I said, wars of occupations or transfers of wealth. So from the American taxpayer to corporations. So, I mean, it's pretty, I don't know, dude. It's pretty interesting. And then to see the shit show that's kind of evolved into is even worse.
Yeah, it's a lot of that's even hard to watch.
Oh, it's terrible. Well, it's because like I think what's hard for us is the fact that we fought this 20-year war, and now we've left, and now we've basically made the Taliban like the 10th most like well-armed army on the planet. I mean, shit, you see those dudes are running around in our uniforms, like, and I'm like, holy shit, dude, this is like a bad fucking movie.
Well, we were told, oh, they'll never figure out how to use the equipment. They'll never figure out how to fly it. What are we, a week in, and images coming out of them flying our helicopters?
Well, of course. I mean, because think about it. People that are, I mean, you don't think that at the first jump you had countries like China and Russia and other countries sending, consultants down to teach them how to use the tech. I mean, if I was Chinese and I saw this going down, my first phone call would be like, what do you got? Okay, who do you need to decipher this tech? We'll send them in. I mean, that's what happened. I mean, just outside contracting groups from people that are, maybe allies, maybe not allies to us, but, basically sending individuals in there to get these guys up to speed right quick. I mean, can you imagine, what does that cost? Hey, China, Russia, can you send us contractors that teach us how to use all this American shit? Sure, let's do it. So, I mean, it's it's very, very naive. And unfortunately, in years past, people or, General Milley and these individuals that plan this stuff would have the wherewithal to be like, we did a terrible fucking job. Now it's time for us to step down. But these fucking cowards won't. I mean, General Milley, what a piece of shit.
Yeah.
I mean, just like when he got up and was talking about that critical race theory that they should be teaching, and he's like, well, I read Mao Zedong. Didn't make me a communist. I'm like, yeah, you're also a 60-year-old general officer that's reading this information as part of a curriculum. You're not a individual teaching it to 5-year-olds. So what you're saying is that you think that elementary school teachers should read Mao Zedong and the Unabomber's Communist Manifesto and read that information and teach it to 5-year-olds? Like, it's disingenuous. And you know what? I think, unfortunately, it's interesting times. There's an old proverb that says, may you live in interesting times. And unfortunately, it's not a positive one. And we are living in interesting times.
And that is a fact. So, and I know you have to run, but I want to just have one more question. With everything that's going on, as I said earlier, I know you're an avid reader. What are 2 to 3 books that you would recommend?
The one book that I really think everybody should read is called Coddling of the American Mind. Let me go grab it. So I'm going to mess up. It's got 2 authors. It's called Coddling of the American Mind. Yep, there it is. Okay, Coddling the American Mind by Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt. And I think that's an excellent one. There's another book by William Strauss called The Fourth Turning. It's called An American Prophecy. It's basically titled "In the Cycles of History Tells About America's Next Rendezvous with Destiny." That has been an extremely scary and eye-opening book that I think everybody should read. And then there's another book by Senator Mike Lee called "Written Out of History: The Forgotten Founders Who Fought Our Big Government." So it's pretty interesting to go through that one and see how history has been written, by the victors and how different people have been portrayed. And then obviously, Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules, and then his next book, which is called Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life, is another excellent read. So I just finished The Fourth Turning and Jordan Peterson's stuff. And so, yeah, I've been hammering on those. And obviously Jocko's Extreme Leadership is always good. These are always, books that you should have. So I'm always interested when I meet people or go over to people's houses. I'm always interested to see what their library looks like. And what'll happen is I'll read a good book and then I'll give it to somebody. And then I'll think about it a month later. And then I'll be like, oh shit, I want to look up something. And then I end up rebuying it from my own library. So I'm sure these Amazon people are like, why is this guy buying 2 books every couple of months? But yeah, I think that Fourth Turning is really, really, really interesting. It talks about how we're basically entering the fourth turning of this country. And I think they put it around 2025. So that's when things are supposed to get the most interesting. But they predict a lot of stuff from the stock market crash and what. So I thought that was a real interesting piece. Something for everybody should pore over.
I haven't read that. I will have to check that one out. I haven't read that one yet.
Yeah, Fourth Turning. It's one of those books you're going to read and then you're going to hit me up and be like, fuck, why did I read that? Because there's 2 types of people. Right, I've come to the conclusion that in present day, there's 2 types of people. There's people that want to know what's happening, and then there's a whole bunch of people that don't want to know what the fuck is going on. I met my wife and I go back to this because I'll talk to her about certain stuff, and I think she just sometimes is like, I don't have enough bandwidth to comprehend a lot of this stuff, and so it's kind of for some things, some people have a lot of bandwidth and they get really wrapped around the axle with this stuff. Other people don't have bandwidth, but I think a lot of this stuff, and this is what I caution people on, don't get too polarized. That's something that I've noticed a lot is people get really polarized and the whole world's coming to an end. But then you go out and you talk to your neighbors and everybody's real friendly. Or you go over to your friend's house or you go over to a neighborhood party, and most people are pretty good people. So I think what's interesting is you have to be smart enough to realize what's being presented to us and how to decipher the information. What are the arguments being made? But also remember that most people are just, good people that are raising their kids, trying to get through and do the best they can. And I think that there has to be a tempering of because if you listen to the media, you think your neighbors are, trying to fucking blow up your house and kill you and, all this other shit, but that just isn't the case.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head, going out and having real conversations in person with your neighbors, not on Facebook or Instagram or anything else. You realize that the world's not quite as bad as social media makes it out to be.
Do you think, so how the Nobel Prize came into effect, right? So the Nobel family, the guy invented dynamite.
Yes.
And he was so guilty about the destruction and all the, death that had come at the hands of his invention, they created the Nobel Prize. Do you think Mark Zuckerberg will realize at some point that Facebook will be, can mark the fucking end of existence? Do you think he'll look back and be like, man, we probably would have been a better world if I hadn't been born, or more importantly, I hadn't done this? Because I'll tell you this, I think Facebook, if you ever read a book called Tribes, humans were designed to live in kind of smaller communities.
Yeah, I have read that one.
Yeah. So what I think the problem is that Facebook has allowed us to connect into such a large ecosystem that it's beyond, it's as foreign to us as Michael Rose, talking about not returning to our ancestral diet. And what's amazing is that the amount of outrage and anger and this that people have on social media is insane to me, because I hear people talk to each other and I see interactions that would never fucking happen in person. Because if you ever talk to anybody like that, you get your fucking ass beat.
Exactly.
And I'm like, you know what? Like they almost need to make like a feature to where like a fist comes out and punches you in the face out of your computer. Because I hear how rude people are, and I'm like, Jesus, I wouldn't say this to anybody. And it's kind of why, like my social media is kind of bland in a lot of ways, just because, fuck, I got so much stuff to do, and I have so many more people to invest in personally. Like I got 3 kids, I got a business, I have people, we train, we do all this other shit. I've been trying to build a staircase for my gym for the last 2 weeks. I'm trying to get that finished. I mean, we got an event coming up. I mean, there's so many things to do that sitting there and arguing with people on the internet. And I don't know if any of you guys know this that listen to this podcast, but if you argue with somebody on the internet, nobody is going to change their mind. I don't think in the history of the internet, anybody's ever been like, get into a heated argument and have one side be like, you know what? You were extremely articulate. I'm going to change my position. You're right. That's never happened in the history of the internet. All that happens is when you get into an argument, people just dig in deeper. And you're never going to change anybody's mind. So why even enter into the argument? Are you just trying to feed your inner child? That's what I think it is. I think it's a lot of people that are just trying to feed their inner child by getting into arguments with people that'll never fucking see your point of view. Yeah,
and this way they can, I don't know, it gives them some weird sense of satisfaction that in their mind they're right, whether who's right or who's wrong. But even like perfect example is Joe Rogan just came out and said that he had COVID and they gave him this cocktail, whatever. And he feels fine now, but he's getting absolutely blasted on the internet for taking the wrong stuff or being against whatever it is. And I'm like, why can he not be in control of his own body and his own health?
Yeah, he's a 53-year-old man. He should be the master of his own destiny. He should be able to take whatever he wants. I mean, the guy takes DMT and, a bunch of psychedelics and, has done drugs and whatever. I mean, okay, so like, what's the fucking huge problem? Yeah. I mean, if the problem is that anybody with an internet connection feels that they're entitled to an opinion. And more important, and this is what I go back to on this, and this is like the last fucking sword I'm going to fall on, is not every person, everybody's allowed to have their own opinion, but not all opinions carry the same weight, right? Like I could have an opinion on a 22 rimfire, but unfortunately I would defer to you and I would be like, hey Scott, like, what do you think of this? Because you have more experience and you're an expert. Like when people talk about football and they ask my opinion and then they want to argue with me, I'm like, dude, I'm telling you from my perspective, I haven't played in the NFL for 10 years. I'm just telling you what I think. At the end of the day, you've never strapped it up a single day. So how can you make that judgment? It's like people talking about hunting who have never hunted. So like it's amazing the amount of people that are willing to throw their hat in the ring and have this opinion that have never done these things and have zero fucking weight in terms of their deal. And I think everybody has the right to their own opinion, but I have the right to think you're an asshole. And more importantly, I have the right to discount your opinion because you have no fucking point of view or perception, or you have no street cred to be able to fucking provide it. It's like, dude, I'm 6'6". Okay. So therefore when it, when I look at opinions, only people that are 6'6" and taller have an opinion. Like it's like, that's like the same deal. Like, you don't know what it's like to be short. Great. Okay. That's fine. I'm not going to weigh in on it because I don't know what it's like to be short. I haven't been that height since I was 8. Like it's, you know what I'm saying? Like it's almost to the point of crazy. And like, I've got into discussions with people and like my favorite is, one of the classic ones. We went and presented at a gym. These guys brought us into doing continuing education. And they were like, this lady was talking about how to get strong. And this other lady popped up who wasn't strong and was telling her all the ways to get strong. And my comment is, if you want to get strong, talk to strong people. If you want to get in good shape, talk to people that are in good shape. If you want to know how to shoot shoot good distance, I want to be, sub MOA at 1,000 yards, 10 for 10. Go find somebody that can shoot like that. They'll give you an idea on ballistic coefficients, what round they're shooting, how they do it, and they'll fucking show you exactly how they'll do it because they're not hiding any secrets. Because if you can replicate it, they're happy to have you in the crowd. If you want to squat 1,000 pounds, go find somebody that squatted 1,000 pounds.
I was going to say that shooting's the perfect analogy too, because I've been around guns all my life, grew up in the industry, But you put me around like some Marine snipers or something like that, and I'm all ears because they've actually done it in a life and death situation.
Yeah.
And every time, like Winter Strong's a perfect example when, guys like Brady or Buck or those guys come down, when they talk, I'm listening because every single year I go down there, I learn something that I can both apply to myself and then turn around and teach to other people. But it requires people to set their ego aside and actually be willing to ask questions and learn from those that have done it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's, I wrote a blog post years ago and it was called like, always be a white belt. I think if you approach every situation like a white belt, that, you're going to, have great information presented to you, and I'm going to be a student. And I think if you can look at like, and I do it constantly, if you can meet somebody that has greater knowledge than you, that will mentor you and bring you along, shit, even if I think, so I weld and fabricate and I'm decent, but shit, if I like, Joel from Overkill Racing or my neighbor down the street, Jesse James from West Coast Choppers, Jesse randomly hit me up about 2 weeks ago and he's like, hey, send me some of your TIG welds. And so I sent up some stuff and he was like, man, swing on by, dude. Like if you want me to coach you up on your welding. And I'm like, sweet. I can TIG weld, but like, dude, if Jesse James is going to coach me on TIG welding, I'll go over. I went out to Utah, Salt Lake, and Joel from Overkill, who builds all those crazy monster trucks and for the Diesel Brothers. He's one of the best fabricators and welders. Shit, man. I'm like, teach me, show me how to be the best. And I think like that mentality of like being humble enough and, one of the quotes in our methodology book is from Bruce Lee, which is, basically you got to empty your cup. If your cup is full, then I can't pour into your cup and I can't fill it. If your cup is empty, I can pour into your cup, I can fill it, and we can potentially learn. And the problem is most of the people are just walking around with full cups. And there's no room to pour anything into. So I think about that analogy a lot, especially when I get a chance to work with really sharp people and, and learn. Just empty your cup and be a white belt. And I think if more people took that approach, we'd probably be a little farther along than we are.
Absolutely. Well, once again, I want to thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate this. Where can people find everything you have going on, both personally and through Power Athlete?
Yeah, I'm real easy to find. Just add John Welbourn on social. That's JohnWelbourn. And then if you just Google Power Athlete, you can find us at Power Athlete HQ on social media. We're big on Instagram. We don't have a TikTok. I don't do little dances. But yeah, Facebook and just really, any social media. But if you guys want to look up the podcast, it's Power Athlete Radio. We do, a couple of them a week. So, and, it's been very, very fulfilling to have that podcast and to be on ones like this, just because it allows like-minded people to connect and hopefully find some new audiences and increase our genealogy.
Well, I appreciate it, John. And I want to thank everybody for listening. As always, if you have any questions or suggestions, please hit us up at podcast@volquartson.com. Leave us a review, give us your feedback. We look forward to connecting. Thank you.